Folks, hello. Um, so earlier this week I got stuck in PowerPoint mode during some day, and I got a little bit frustrated, and so I dove into the whole Apache Beam project. Um, so that kind of got out of hand, and I kept hacking until the wee hours. Long story short, so I started putting all the things I've learned into a few fairly small projects. One is called Kettle Beam Core, which contains the core classes. And what I'm trying to do here is provide a pipeline builder for Beam that supports kettle transformations, basically. So this revolves around mapping a new plugin that I introduced, the Beam input step, to the Beam input. And what this does is it takes a pbegin, which is the terminology, and it converts this from the source location into a bunch of kettle rows. A P collection is the output, basically. You can see this through the signature here. So it extends a P transform, and we start from a beginning and we output a collection of kettle rows. This is how this is modeled into the pipeline model of Apache Beam. Now, the thing to remember is always that these methods here, these variables, these are serialized. So whatever kind of classes you use in here need to be serializable. For simplicity, I mapped as much as I could to strings. For example, the desired output XML of the step, I put this one as an XML, and then in this function, which functions on the row level, it does a parallel function for this row. It knows what to output and what kind of row to output. So I'm passing this on from the pipeline builder inside of Spoon. I know what the output is going to be in every step of the way, so there's really not an issue there. So for the output, I'm doing similar things. Group I is still in progress. Group I is a little bit more complicated in the sense that you go through three phases, basically. The first one is to split your row into a group portion and a subject portion. The second part is to do a group by key, which then results in a key value pair, which always consists of the group identity and a bunch of rows in that group. And this gets then done repeatedly until you have one set of rows for every group, and that gets aggregated into into this part, which then again outputs a collection of kettle row. So you can actually combine multiple things in one step, but this is how you can do like a parallel distributed group I. Okay, and finally, of course, the mapping of generic transformations is also done. We get a collection of rows as input and one as output, and this is done through the step function that I created, and it's not perfect yet. So this one creates a mini transformation, which not actually gets started. It's just I'm not starting any threads or something. It's like a mini single threaded transformation, and there's a lot of setup here. It's just getting around the Kettle API for a second. And so once the rows are getting pushed through, it's actually a little bit of code. It's not that much. So you get basically the row from the context that I'm running in. I'm putting the row into a producer. I'm increasing the read count. And yeah, I'm processing the injector step that I added and the process row, and that's pretty much it. So there is a little bit of an initialization cost, but it's pretty low actually. Running locally on the Beam direct runner doesn't give me too much trouble. Yeah, so that's kind of like what that core thing looks like. I split it up into core and the other project, Kettle Beam itself. And Beam actually consists of all the plugins and the wrappers and the pipeline constructor itself. So if we look into that code, you know, there's some a perspective which contains like some helper menus, some new menu items in Spoon. Here's the pipeline, the transformation pipeline converter, which creates the pipeline, and two new steps: beam input, beam output. I'm going to talk about those a little bit. And a couple of metastore objects, and one is for the definition of the files, and one is for the Beam job config. I'll talk about those in a bit. Now to get this thing compiled and run on your own system, I'm not distributing any plugins right now because you know, the whole Apache Beam downloads is a big one. But you can yeah, if you're a little bit familiar with Maven, you can get this to install pretty quickly. So for Kettle Beam core, it's a simple jar file, obviously. You just run a Maven clean install after checking out this project, forking it and checking it out, and yeah, just make sure that you have this this settings XML from Pentao in your Maven M2 folder, and then you just copy this Kettle Beam jar. Let's take a look at how this looks in my case. So Beam core, and so you will find, like in targets, a Kettle Beam snapshot.jar. So this is the one that you don't copy to the plugins folder, but into your Pentao data integration lib folder, because yeah, for some reason Apache Beam is a little bit peculiar about class paths and all that stuff. I'm still trying to figure that out and come up with a better way of packaging things. Okay, so the second thing to do is for the Beam project. Once you build the core, it will be in your Maven repositories locally. So then you compile Kettle Beam again, same thing, Maven clean install, and then you need to create like a new plugins folder called Kettle Beam in the plugins of your PDI distribution, your Kettle download. And you copy this Kettle Beam jar file. In my case, this looks like Beam targets Kettle Beam snapshot.jar 0004. Too lazy to increment it. If I release it, it will be 010 or something. So then there's a whole bunch of dependencies that get built. So if you go into target lib, you will figure out there's like a whole plethora of libraries, and you copy them all into the lib folder of Pentao data integration. what I would do is I would back up the whole thing, create a copy of the whole data integration folder, um, because this is all still highly experimental. A couple of things to look out for is that there are some Jackson libraries which conflict with what is in your Pentile folder. In my case, so these things, I think it says 292 and 295 or something on Jackson Core. So feel free to update these in Kettle Lib. Otherwise, you kind of get like kind of funky things happening if you add both of them. Jackson is not the smartest library. Anyway, that should get you past all that. What else to do? Yeah, that's what we covered. So that's it. Startup Spoon, and if you're lucky, you will see Spoon and a new Beam menu. And so the first thing we do is we create like a new input file definition, and the file definition basically is a way around pointing your let's say MapReduce to some folder or whatever, and then doing a split string to fields, and it's just so horrible, right? So what I'm trying to do here is saying like, okay, so we have a bunch of folders, let's say in a HDFS folder or in a Google Cloud Platform store, file storage somewhere. And so what we're doing is we're just describing these files, right? What kind of separator, what kind of enclosure, and so we give that a name. So this means that if we use like a Beam input file format, we can say, okay, this is the customer's or say clickstream file format, right? And yeah, so what you would also find useful is to use the Pentile datasets plugin to run with this, because this one doesn't produce any output yet if you run this locally. And honestly, I'm thinking it might confuse a lot of people if we would actually be able to preview this. But the way around that is simply to use the to just create a unit test, a new test case, and set up an input data set for this step. It does describe the output fields and everything, but yeah, that's so much more convenient to debug these locally. And so so what I can do here is, okay, so I'm uppercasing California, I'm filtering some rows, and I'm reordering first name and last name, doing some stuff. So you can debug these things. Actually, that one doesn't do anything. It's just a dummy, I think. So so what happens now is that we can make a Beam configuration, and so the one that you want to do first is the direct Beam configuration. And so in this case, so we're using a temp file, and what I'm also doing is I am defining two variables here, which I can use in the input and output Beam steps, so that I can say, okay, for the direct runner, I'm just testing with local files. This is a test file to run with, and I'm just saving this to the customer's temporary folder. Okay, so these variables will then get set at runtime. Okay, so let's try this on Beam. Run this transformation on the direct one, and so it says your transformation was started on the selected Beam runner. Now check the Spoon console, which is somewhere over here. There's probably lots of exceptions and stuff like that. I don't know what I did now, but this is kind of like the idea where I'm heading for. Um, and then you could also run this on Dataflow. So, so I'm probably gonna have to take a look at what's going on in Dataflow. I'll just wait a bit. It's just stupid coding from my end. So this thing has seen some iteration. You can see the failed job. The graph is still being analyzed. So here we go. So it converted this transformation, the pipeline that I created, into a bunch of things, right? And so now this thing will start to process the file that I pointed to. I tried to make this non-blocking. I'll fix this later. Just poses like a whole new, opens a whole new can of worms. It's like, okay, it's a long job. How do I keep track of all the jobs I started, and how do I? So probably need to start saving some metadata somewhere, probably in the meta store as well, to see all my running jobs. And yeah. But in any case, so this looks good. The storage I talked about is, if the first time you run this thing on Dataflow is kind of slow, that is because what's happening is that in my yeah, let me just kill this one and restart it for now. Now you can see it's all a bit experimental. Don't get your expectations up too high. But it's nothing I can't fix in a short amount of time. So what will happen is that so in the data flow, I specify like where to store the binaries. What will happen is that the first time you load this is that the Dataflow runner will upload all the Kettle binaries from the lib folder. So I'm going to make that so that it also includes like specific plugins you might want, and then I'll probably in those Beam Kettle inits I'll probably enable the plugins that are needed. But in any case, so that might take a few minutes. In my case, I'm on a fast connection. That's actually faster than I thought. I think maybe Google recognizes certain I don't know how they do it, but it was pretty quickly. I'm not sure how. I didn't see my connection spike or anything. Something really clever is going on. On the whole, Apache Beam kind of thing is pretty awesome. It corresponds very much to the Kettle way of running steps, so it was pretty cool to see that happen. I'm also running on a on a very cheap Dataflow kind of thing, so this is by no means excelling in performance. It's just running on some virtualized hardware, I think. So it's quite slow to start up. This was apparently meant for streaming or very long running jobs. It has like a startup hit, but now you can see it getting running, right? Anyway, what else to talk to you about? Yeah, I don't know what happened to the direct runner. That was working earlier. Let's see. Yeah, now it works. It's probably related to the unit test. I need to do some extra checks. In this case, my output was in the temp customers folder, and so here you can see these files. So in this case, it created like 4 different partitions, and yeah, that's sort of like what I had to say about Apache Beam. I saw that my initial tweet was well received and got retweeted all over the place, and people kept asking me to give some more feedback, and Detard kept asking me for this Hello World thing, and so well, here you go, play around with it. The group by step is not working yet, neither is sort, and if you start fanning this out, or doing stream lookups or stuff like that, that's not going to work either. For the setup of Google Cloud Dataflow, just follow the procedure, set up a billing account, set up the whole thing, and I think I set like a couple of Google Google application credentials, for example. It's a key that it identifies you on the system, so it logs on automatically. It recognizes, uses this one to see which product you use. This one is no longer needed because I included it in the Beam configs for Dataflow. This is the one. App name is used in the runners over here, so it's kind of cool to see Kettle finally popping up here. And so the metrics or the custom counters are also included here. So 1 per step, so dummy, California uppercase, and limit fields. So you can see where it's at in this processing thing. I realized how slow and cheap this is when I noticed that after all my testing I only owed Google like 7 euro cents. So maybe I need to look at something more beefy. But yeah, I would say please leave feedback in the projects so that we can improve this thing. I'm quite excited about Dataflow. If you have more experience with Spark and all the features it needs, things like checkpointing, directory, batch interval, bundle size. There's a bunch of options that I see in the Spark runner pipeline options. Let me know which one you need, and I'll try to make that one run as well. And Flink, never used that one, but I'll maybe try to do MapReduce as well, and test that on my Hortonworks sandbox. So much to do, so little time. I probably won't venture into these other areas because we can always do these later. But I'll probably focus on getting group by and sort figured out first. I think that should be very doable. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye bye. Enjoy it.